I thought I was right on that. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December 6th meeting of the Comox Valley Sewage Commission. I'd like to welcome both new and returning members to our meeting today, and as well as staff who are here in the CVRD boardroom with us. I'd just like to acknowledge that in accordance with the terms of reference, the election of the chair and vice chair shall occur at the first meeting in 2023. As the elected chair for 2022, Director Hillian, myself, may serve as the presiding member for this meeting. And doesn't seem like there's anybody who's objecting to that, so we shall carry forward. I'd like to recognize that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And we will move through our agenda with the first item being the management report dated December 22nd. A motion for receipt, please. Moved Wells, second to McCollum. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Oops, sorry, we've got Director Swift.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the Sandy Dump situation and how that progress is progressing.
Mr. Chair, I'll just refer that question to Chris LaRose, the Senior Manager.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. So this project is definitely, I acknowledge it's dragging on. It's proven to be very challenging to identify a location that can accommodate this type of facility and the associated lineage. We had a very promising site that we spent a fair bit of time this fall exploring, but as we just learned over the last couple of days that site is not supported by the Ministry of Transportation, who is a key stakeholder, given that it was within the Ministry of Road right-of-way. We are, however, exploring a couple different locations at a CVRD owned property, and so we're trying hard to we definitely acknowledge the need and that this is a priority for the commission, and I really hope to have some better news for you next time we talk.
Thanks very much. Any further questions or comments? Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to items 1 and 2 were just under the action, it's blank. And I'm just wondering if that means that it's completed or if there's an actual date of completion. Sorry, Chris, do you want to just respond to that?
Yeah, so the first, sorry, I didn't have the document up on my page here, but the yeah, so item 1, the stage 2 plan is about to be submitted over the coming days. We've been working through some final feedback received from our final circulation of the document to the TAC and the PAC in September. So we're working through that with our engineering consultants, and we are days away from submittal of that plan. So that's number 1. And next up, yeah, apologies for not including an update on that item.
And then number 2 was the $150,000 amendment to the budget.
Yes, for the valley management process. So, yep. So that amendment was done. The valley management process was actually scheduled for this month, but we've deferred that by a month just to make sure that we have everything ready and we can make that as a valuable process or useful a process as possible. If we now expect that process to occur in January, February, and then we'll report back to the commission.
Excellent. But the amendment itself is completed?
Yes.
Probably. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that. Further comments? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to receipt? That is carried. And we now have the Sewage Commission terms of reference, and we'll take a motion for receipt. Moved McCollum, seconded Swift, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. I'll introduce Jake Martins, who will provide just an outline of the terms of reference and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Russell, through the chair. Yeah, the terms of reference are provided there for the commission's review and receipt. I just want to provide a little bit more detail with respect to the membership, because there's a few details that are not provided in the terms of reference that are worth bringing to your attention. Firstly, a policy adopted in 2019, policy number 69, provides that the director for electoral area B may participate in a non-voting fashion on the commission with respect to those matters that relate to infrastructure and operations within electoral area B. So Director Hardy, who's the new director for Area B, would be eligible to again attend, participate in the meetings in a non-voting fashion with respect to those matters. Further, in 2022, last year, or this year, I should say, that the service was expanded to include portions of electoral area A. And so electoral area is now a formal participant in the sewage service, although financial contributions are not going to be provided, of course, until service is actually provided down in those areas. So this means that for those matters that come before the board with respect to the service, those are limited in nature, but bylaws certainly are a key one. Electoral area A would be eligible to participate in that. However, the Sewage Commission, the participants around the table are determined by bylaw number 650. And that essentially establishes the commission, the 7 representatives that are on the table, and delegates the authority to it. And so an amendment to 650 to add electoral area A is contemplated as the sewer extension south project advances. And so in the interim, it is at the chair's discretion on inviting the area A director to participate in a non-voting fashion here at the commission. So again, just want to bring that to your attention. And the last item here with respect to membership is with regards to Comox First Nation. And as many of the commission members will recall, the commission has resolved to invite non-voting participation on the commission a number of years ago, and that invite has been recently reissued. We've also committed through the community benefit agreement to work together with Comox First Nation towards them becoming a full member on the commission. And so that work's certainly not concluded at this point. We expect it will take time, but that commitment is there and the parties will strive towards that. With that, Mr. Chair, if you please answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Jake. Any questions or comments on this item? Jake, I'll just ask a minor point, but the terms of reference make reference to reporting to the board, but don't actually make reference to the regional district board until later on in the document. Is there a context that makes that more sensible?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So any reference to the board would refer to the CVRD board. And if that's not clear, certainly we can try and adjust that terms of reference to make that clear.
Well, I think it's obvious to all of us, but just if somebody were reading this for the first time, they wouldn't actually know that this was a commission that reported to the board.
Yeah, point well taken. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Okay,
and we can make that adjustment.
Thanks. All right, Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. So sorry for jumping in. One of the things I wondered, when it talks to the election, it talks about it being in the first meeting of the year. And my recollection when I was first on the board is the first meeting of the year was also the first meeting of the commission, because the elections were much later in the year. I wonder if it makes sense, like now it says, like we're going through a process where we're going to later on today have a presiding member for one meeting and then have a vote in the new year. Is that a common practice amongst other regional districts? Like it seems a little awkward is a good word. Thanks, Director Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I think I can appreciate the awkwardness, and I think this is a relatively new issue given the calendar has changed with respect to elections. I can't speak to the experience of the practice of other regional districts, and I think for the 3 to 4 years of the term, it's not an issue. It's just following that election, which becomes a bit awkward for us. I think this is something we can certainly look at and see if there's an approach that might reduce that awkwardness following an election. But yeah, I don't have a solution right at the moment, but certainly I think it's reasonable that we could come up with an approach that might better address this.
Yeah. I mean, just off the top of my head, instead of having it for the first of the year, just say the first meeting after an election or whatever, because it's for, or is it every year that there's a re-election as well? So
Correct. Yeah. Every year there's an election. And one of the, certainly the principles that we wish to continue to see is just consistency across the organization so that we're not tying ourselves in a bit of a knot with different practices at different bodies. But again, this is a consistent issue that's being faced across a number of our committees and commissions.
yeah, and I know with water, I think even the election voting amounts, or not election, but the voting amounts have to wait for apportionment numbers and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So it's tying in knots is a good pretzels, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of the terms of reference? Seeing none, that's carried. Our next item is the Sewage Management Advisory Committee minutes from November the 22nd. A motion for receipt, please. Move Swift, second, and McCollum. Over to staff.
No comment on the advisory committee minutes, but if you have any questions, we're available to answer them.
Questions from commission members? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt? That is carried. And we shall move on to orientation, Comox Valley Sewage Service, and a staff presentation.
Second.
We'll take that as a motion to receive by Director Grant, seconded by Wells. And over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. And Chris LaRose is here to provide orientation, and we're all here available to answer any questions as we go through this presentation to you. So don't hesitate to raise your hands and ask questions about the service and how business is conducted and what our priorities are.
And just before you start, Chris, I'll acknowledge that Major Hargraves from CFB Comox has joined us via Zoom. Welcome, Major, and thanks for joining us.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Russell, and through the chair to members of the commission. So I prepared a brief presentation to support this orientation. So I know there's a lot of familiar faces around the table, so I will keep it relatively brief. But as Russell said, we're available to answer any questions you might have about the service. There we go. Thanks, Lisa. So the fundamentals, the purpose of the service is to receive bulk wastewater from the participants, convey that wastewater to our treatment plant, treat it, and then dispose of it through our ocean outfall. The participants of the service include the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay, as well as the Department of National Defense and the Comox First Nation from their settlement on IR1. In terms of governance, this is it. The Sewage Commission governs the service with advice from staff, and the Sewer Advisory, which is composed of senior municipal staff and CVRD staff who meet and review reports and all important financial technical decisions in advance of bringing them through the commission. And then the service itself is operated by up to about 14 operators, working, most of them working out at the treatment plant near Brant Road, but 2 of them working and dedicated to the composting facility up near the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Center. Just a little bit of history on the service. So prior to 1984, when the existing infrastructure was completed and commissioned, Courtenay had primary treatment of their wastewater located near the air park. And then that primary effluent was discharged to the estuary. Comox discharged untreated wastewater to the estuary through a pipe that's obviously since been decommissioned that runs up and over HFCS Quadra and out into Sound. And then the DND had a primary form of treatment and then discharged to the Queen's Ditch, where it then flowed out to the ocean. So 1984, the existing system was completed. And that includes all the pump stations required to receive wastewater from the kind of central points of collection from the previous municipal and participant systems, and then for conveyance to the treatment plant. And then the treatment plant itself which is shown in the top right there under construction over between Brent Road and Curtis Road. And then the ocean outfall was also built at that time. In that initial concept for the project, it did include on-site composting of the biosolids, but that proved to be not a great idea. It was a very odorous process and caused a real rift with the local residents in that area. So there was a ensuing process and legal action, which did result in 1999, approximately, a new biosolids composting facility was built, which is the one you see at the bottom right up near the CSWM facility. And all composting operations at that plant have since then been terminated. So this map shows an overview of the system in its current configuration, which includes 6 pump stations. So the two big ones receiving wastewater from Courtney and Comox, as well as a smaller pump station at KFN IR1, a recently completed pump station at HMCS Quadra for receipt of the wastewater from that D&D facility. There's one up at Colby Road, just to the west of Lazo Marsh, and then CFB Comox pump station, which is in kind of the low-lying area near the Queen's Ditch. And then in those pump stations utilize a series of force mains that run along from the large pump stations along the foreshore, largely to the treatment plant, and then a small overland force mains from Colby Road and the CFB Comox. And then over the last 4 or 5 years, we've added 2 large gravity trunk lines, which are at the top of the screen there, which are designed to capture flows, divert some modest amount of flows from existing settled areas, but capture some more significant anticipated development in those areas over time. And of course, the treatment plant's located there with a star, and then the outfall is shown. So roughly 3 kilometers along the beach up to a point near Cape Lazo, and then 3 kilometers from the beach out to the outfall itself, which is about 70 meters of water. And it's like a large diffuser that helps to spread and dilute that wastewater, that treated effluent, as it's discharged into the ocean. So just a very brief highlight of current planning work and projects underway. So on the planning side, as I mentioned earlier in response to the question, the stage 2 liquid waste management plan is now complete and will be submitted this week to the province to initiate their review and start that clock running. We're told between 9 to 12 months in terms of a review period before we can expect a conditional letter of support, which would provide some guidance on the subsequent and last stage 3 for that planning process. We have a site master planning process underway at the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center, and this is with the primary outcome being a schedule for upgrades at that facility to help us meet the anticipated growth of the community. And then finally, a DCC study is anticipated or scheduled for after those 2 planning processes are complete, so we can make sure that everybody's paying their fair share of these projects. And then an outfall assessment is planned for next year to help us fine tune the date or the timing of replacement for that infrastructure. Big projects on the go right now. The sewer conveyance project dwarfs them all. It's keeping us very busy. Charlie Gorel will be providing an update on that project later in this agenda, so I won't get into it here. In addition to that project, we have the rehabilitation of one of our secondary clarifiers this coming year, and then a major priority is continued implementation of our asset management plan for this service. And moving along in terms of a brief financial overview, so the operating budget for 22 for this year is projected at 8.3 million. And the capital spending for this year is 16, just to give you an idea of the scale of the service and the ongoing costs. Revenue for the service is almost entirely from the municipal requisition, with a small contribution from the service agreements for both D&D and the KFN. All but the KFN are based on flows. So they effectively pay a proportion of the operating budget based on their proportion of flows. The conveyance project is the vast majority of that current capital. One of the kind of the realities that we're working through in delivery of this project and others right now are the inflationary pressures that we're experiencing, as well as supply chain issues, and both of which are adding to increasing costs. And then there are on the horizon some other major projects that will be authorized by the Liquid Waste Management Plan. So with the plan being submitted this week, we're still looking at roughly 2026 before those are implemented, and you'll see them embedded in the financial plan that'll be brought through the commission early in 23. Just wanted to highlight that municipal staff are engaged in all important financial decisions as well as technical ones through the advisory committee, and just finally to highlight that that our partnership with Comox, with the KFN, is highly critical for delivery of the conveyance project and just more generally service delivery. And finally, just to highlight some of the key challenges and opportunities. So obviously we have aging infrastructure. We have some significant environmental risk in the form of the unresolved force main along the Wilmar Bluffs being the key driver for the conveyance project. We struggle with a significant increase in flows during the winter from inflow and infiltration to the system. So that's something that we're working closely in collaboration with our municipal partners to help resolve. Population growth it's a challenge and an opportunity in terms of increasing our economies of scale. And then, of course, just working to ensure as a result of both the inflow and infiltration and population growth that we maintain adequate capacity in our infrastructure. In terms of opportunities, we're continuing to progress asset management to help us look out farther and more accurately at what's coming for the service. We're undertaking robust planning processes before initiating major projects, working very closely with the public to ensure that what we're delivering is in alignment with them. And leveraging our partnerships, our key partnerships such as with the KFN, the DND, and of course our municipal participants. So that's all I had for the orientation, but I'm happy to speak to any of this or answer any questions.
And over to Russell.
Chris, could you just add one more thing, and that is the capital expenditure charge as a form of revenue that what we have in place to collect from new connections and for capital works.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned on an earlier slide, we'll be completing our once the site master planning process and the conveyance planning or procurement is complete, we'll be undertaking a development cost charge update. So the DCC is a rate that's charged for all new development within the service area, and it's based and tied to the projects that are facing the service. So it needs to be updated on a periodic basis to for the current cost estimates for those projects for the current project list. And so that's for development within the service area. There's a matching rate called the capital improvement cost charge, which is charged for any new lots or units that are brought into the service area. And our practice has been, and consistent with our other services, is to have that rate the same. So whether it be development occurring within the service area or extending service to areas outside of the existing service area, they're both captured just with their respective rates. And so over the past few years, we've seen very significant revenue flowing into the service as a result of the very significant growth that the community has been experiencing. And as we look to potentially extend service into the south region, there's a very large potential revenue coming from that direction as well, to help dilute these costs and spread them out over more connections, more population, help to ease the pain.
Thanks for that elaboration, Chris. Any questions or comments from commission members? Director McCollum.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I actually had a question about the explanation that you're giving around DCCs, and you were explaining that we have the same charges whether it's within the existing service or an expansion of. Is there is that required under the legislation that we charge DCCs under, or is it possible to have two levels of DCCs depending on whether or not it's existing within the, the blueprint of our existing infrastructure versus expansion of it?
Yeah, the legislation does not require that the rates be the same. Although I didn't mention as well that in the case of the potential expansion into Area A, there was also given that that was a new jurisdiction in terms of participating in the service area. There was also a consideration or an injection of funds from a contribution towards the non-depreciated value of the sewer service assets. So that was something that was negotiated at the time. So when you're looking, really when you're looking at the development in the south, it's a combination in terms of their contribution would be a combination of that amount that's already been paid, and the capital improvement cost charge that would be paid by unit. And so there was approximately $500,000 coming in from Area A for their anticipated proportion of the total as a share of the non-depreciated value, and then through negotiation and consultation with the KFN towards the community benefit agreement that was developed to pave the way for the conveyance project. There was a $1 million payment towards that same kind of non-depreciated value, again based on their estimated projected development in the south as a proportion of the sewer service now and when in the future when those loads would be coming in.
Okay, yeah, so that kind of forms part of the basis of the justification of charging the same level of DCCs, because there's an additional cost that they're bearing in advance of individual
Correct.
hookups. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Further questions? Chris, I wonder if it was referenced in the management report, but I wonder if you want to just briefly highlight the ongoing work on the odor issues and the concerns of nearby residents and the successes that the commission and staff have had in dealing with that over the last few years. Yeah, no, excellent point. So as I touched briefly on, that there's a long and bit of a sordid history there with that facility and the impact on the neighbors. So the shift of the composting operation up to the near the CSWM site was not the end of the story. There was aspects to the operation of the facility that remained quite odorous, and so over the years there were further improvements done, covering of certain tankage, etc. But still the problem persisted. And so over the past 6 years, we've done 2 kind of final phases of odor control improvements at the facility, which as an end result, one of the photos is the bottom right there on the screen, shows our bioreactors now covered in addition to our primary tanks and all the even more odorous processes that were previously covered. And so all of those processes are now enclosed under negative pressure, and those odorous gases being run through various odor scrubbing technologies, and then out of a stack, an elevated stack. So it's been a fairly significant expenditure and for the service and endeavor by staff, but that project completed in mid-2021. And since then, we've had silence from the local neighborhood, with the exception of a couple, maintenance shutdowns. It took us a long time to get there, but the plant is now almost fully contained, and the odor issues are now resolved. So we do have an outstanding commitment to come back with a good neighbor policy. So that's something that the commission will be seeing in early 23. We were waiting until the work was complete and follow-up odor studies were done in order to embed a specific commitment for odor at the facility. So that's something that we're finalizing now. And then we'll get that into a draft good neighbor policy and bring it through the commission in 23. Thanks very much for that. Further questions or comments from commission members? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt of the orientation? That is carried. And we move on to item number 4, the sewage system conveyance project updates. And we have a report dated December 1st regarding a description of the sewage system conveyance project, an update on the project status, and a recommendation to apply for grant funding for receipt. So take a motion on that, please. Moved by McCollum, seconded by Grant, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. And Charlie Gore is here to present this report and answer any of your questions.
Testing. Thank you very much, Chair. It's good to see everyone again. It's nice to be back after parental leave and be back on this project. So this is a very succinct presentation today. Just to, as Chris mentioned, there's a lot of familiar faces around the room regarding the previous Sewage Commission, and I think this project has been well publicized. And at this stage, we are still proceeding through the procurement of this project, trying to get a design builder on board in the spring and to release the tender for the design bid build portion through the town of Comox. The report that you have in front of you does have a recommendation, and that's more of a housekeeping task regarding applying for a grant. We need specific wording to be approved by the Commission for that grant, even though we have a general direction from the Commission to apply for all grants necessary for this project. So that recommendation is more of a housekeeping task, and I'm going to focus today on a general update on the project through the presentation. Please feel free to stop me at any time to discuss any details. So just for those that aren't intimately aware with the scope of the project, the project is to replace our pumping and transmission system for the sewage conveyance in the valley. We have 3 pump stations on our existing system, and we'll be building a new pump station at the Courtenay location, and we'll be renovating the Comox pump station, previously known as Jane Place, and the Comox First Nation pump station. We'll be building new transmission force main for the entire length from Courtenay all the way out to the wastewater treatment plant. There is a tunneled section from the corner of Torrance and Lazo out to Moreland Road, and the rest is installed through a more traditional cut and cover. So digging a trench, placing the new pipe in that trench, and then covering it back up. And through the IR1, which is a very high archaeological potential zone, we'll be bypassing around the existing pipe and then pulling out the old pipe and putting the new pipe in that exact same trench to avoid disturbing ground that hasn't been disturbed previously. So that's the scope of the project. As I mentioned, I know many of you are intimately aware with the scope of the project. So if anyone has any questions, again, please feel to stop me as I kind of jump through the slides. As we do this project, we're trying to be a good government, and so we're working closely with the town of Comox to complete surface improvements that were on the books for the town at the same time. So we're only impacting our residents once. So you can see these summarized on the map here. You have the new roundabout up at Glacier View Drive, which is where our force main will be coming along Comox Road as it transitions into Comox Avenue. And then another new roundabout down at Rodello, and that's where the force main is taking a right, a southerly turn down Rodello around the new development that's there. So that'll be 2 of the major surface improvements in Western Comox. There's also some street improvements on Beaufort Avenue down near City Hall, and some more up on Balmoral Avenue and up at around Brooklyn Creek as we get towards the eastern end of the town there. So those surface improvements are being collated into our detailed design for the force main project, and will be tendered to one contractor so they can do it all at the same time and there'll be a lot of cost savings and time management savings for both organizations in getting those done together. As part of the cultural heritage permit that we have received from the Comox First Nation, we are currently going through a phase 1 archaeological investigation to confirm the route that we've chosen for this project. And for those that live in the town of Comox, you will have likely seen our drilling rig out on Beaufort Avenue right now. We're drilling 3-meter deep augers every 30 meters to really prove out our hopes that there's no sensitive archaeological information within that zone. And once that's completed, the rig will be moving along to Balmoral, down Jane Place, and then back towards Bayside, where we'll be doing a series of augers to complement the pits that we've already dug through the farmlands to really quantify any archaeological materials that are on the route of the project and make any necessary adjustments at this stage to avoid them if possible. And if not, to be prepared when we do come through to manage that archaeological materials. Some really positive feedback. So the work we've done to date, we've found no sensitive materials, and that includes some continuous trenching along the boundary of IR1, the western boundary, where the pipeline will be coming down. So it's really positive, and we're hoping for continued good news through that program. Those augers will be complete by Christmas. They're struggling a little bit now with the snow, but the drillers have come in from Alberta, so they know what they're doing with this kind of weather. And with that information in the new year, we'll be confirming the fine details of our route before the procurement for the design build project closes. This is a kind of an overall slide for those that aren't aware of the broader timeline of the project. You can see where we're right in the middle of this timeline right now. As we have completed our open houses through November, which were really successful, and Mary will be talking to those in a moment. But Q1, the next couple of months, is a really critical time for us as we finalize the procurement and get a design builder on board and put that tender out for the construction of the portion through the town. So we're very busy fine-tuning all the details for both contracts right now. And in the spring, that'll be when we have a lot more information for the commission about who, when, and how the project will be being implemented. And that will trigger another major round of public information campaigns, talking about the details of the traffic management strategy, which I'll be presenting to you in a couple of minutes. So that's the extent of my presentation today, but very happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thanks very much, Charlie. We'll start with Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. And I know it's coming up later on in the agenda, but you had pointed out very focused on the grant, which is very exciting, especially on a project of this scale. I just wondered if that grant will be sort of conflicting with any other grants that other municipalities in the Comox Valley may be applying for as well.
It's a good question. I believe that all of the grants under consideration are considered separately by those granting agencies, and for their merits. But I'm sure that there is, the grant that's being applied for is based on that climate change resiliency. So I'm sure there's lots of initiatives going on in our community and surrounding communities as part of that. I'm not intimately aware of any grants that the other municipalities have applied for under the same climate change resiliency program. But again, we've seen time and time again that the agencies have given multiple grants from the same bucket to members of the same community for different initiatives if they meet the objectives and that they're lucky enough to be selected.
Excellent, thanks.
And CAO Dyson.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, just reviewing the advisory committee minutes where we review these matters with municipal staff. So the subject of the grant application was brought up with no comment provided or concerns expressed by municipal staff.
Thanks for that. Any further questions or comments? I might acknowledge, Charlie, it's good to have you back. And I'm sure with being on parental leave with a newborn, the issue of sewage disposal hasn't been far from your attention. So.
I'm back. Don't make me think about it.
All right. On receipt, is there anyone opposed? Seeing, hearing none, that's carried. And would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved Grant, seconded Swift. It's there in print. I won't read the entire thing, but primarily it's authorizing staff to submit a funding application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. And it's got the amounts there. So questions or comments on the recommendation? There's none. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And we shall move on to item number 5, the Comox Valley Sewer Conveyance Project Summary Report dated November 22nd for receipt, please. Moved Grant, seconded Wells, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. And I wish to introduce to you Mary Lee. Mary is a local resident with an extensive communications background. She's joined the regional district for the sole purpose to help and assist us on this particular project. And she will provide to you some information with respect to the most recent public engagement that we've held on this project.
Thanks and welcome, Mary. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to present to you for the first time in this new role and first of many opportunities to share the engagement activities and our successes through the life of the project. The aim of my presentation is to give a brief overview of the engagement summary report of the November open houses and webinar, which you have full details in your package. And secondly, to share next steps in the communication and engagement strategy. Next slide. So the objective of the public engagement was to deliver a high-level concept of the final route without getting into the specific construction details and what to anticipate for traffic impacts. The goal for this stage of the public engagement opportunity falls under the levels of inform and consult on the International Association of Public Engagement, or IAP2, spectrum for public engagement. So to inform, it was an opportunity for the community to build a better understanding of the construction and the traffic impacts and to begin to prepare what's to come in 2023. And to consult, it was a chance to seek further community concerns and identify any community specific issues that could be considered in the contract design. And a sub goal of mine was also to drive the web traffic to a single point of reference for all project information and updates, as well as to continue engagement throughout the life of the project, which is on our Connect CVRD Conveyance Project website. So as you can see on the timeline on the right-hand side, we just finished at step number 5 with the open houses and webinar. And I included step number 6, the archaeological investigation that Charlie Gore just spoke about, as this was a further opportunity to get it into the public with some engagement, which you were briefed on 2 weeks ago with a briefing note and the press release. And that set the tone for the entire project moving forward. Next slide. So we held 3 open houses. 2 were held at the Little Red Church in Comox, and 1 was held at the CVRD boardroom right here, with a 4th opportunity, which was a lunch hour webinar that Russell Dyson had presented and followed up with a question and answer presentation. The intent, of course, of all 4 opportunities was to answer any questions and provide any further information if it was required, as well as to collect feedback from the public. We took a very proactive outreach opportunity to get the word out about the open houses with a successful paid and earned media campaign that involved radio, print, and news releases, coupled with a PR push via direct mailing, emails, our website, and a social media campaign on both Twitter and Facebook. And on the right-hand side, you can see the numbers of our reach. And I gave this small example of one of our boosts on social media on Facebook, just to show you that just that one post on November 3rd, the reach that we were able to make, as well as the engagement that is measured through likes, comments, and shares, as well as the click ratio to get to the website for more information. We sent approximately 8,000 letters, or more than 8,000 letters to residents, and emails sent to the community stakeholders and close to 200 residents. And these were from addresses that we had gathered from the previous engagement opportunities with the liquid waste management project. Next slide. So at the public engagements events, we had on hand the information boards that are in your package, as well as a slide presentation for the webinar. And all of the slides and the boards included details about the need for the project, the final route map, the construction and traffic impacts, the town of Comox infrastructure improvements, the horizontal directional drilling beginning at Balmoral and Torrance and ending at completely forgotten the name of the road.
Grant Road?
Moreland Road.
Okay.
And the cost and the timeline. And on hand, we had about 6 to 8 members of our staff on the project team to answer any questions, as well as town of Comox staff and contractors. And we also had a comment table of comments where comment sheets could be filled out by the attendees. The results from the combined 3 open houses, we resulted in approximately 200 attendees and 39 comments forms filled out. And the webinar resulted in 61 attendees. We had over 80 registered, but be it known, to date on the YouTube video, we've had over 162 views. And then 33 questions were asked during the webinar Q&A session. Next slide. So feedback was collected directly to the staff members at the in-person events. Questions were posed by participants during the online webinar Q&A session, of course, and through our comment forms. And the details are, the greater details of all of the feedback is in your package, but as you will see, there were 6 themes that emerged that are listed here. And these themes are listed in order of interest and priority. These themes also highlight the need for ongoing communication in these key areas for the next series of public engagement opportunities, because the public will really want to know if their feedback is being heard and if their questions or concerns can and have been incorporated into the project. These themes also identify unique stakeholder and interest groups and their individual needs and concerns, many of which we already know, such as the business community, BC transit riders, cyclists and pedestrians, homeowners along the route, service delivery organizations, as well as residents in the key areas along the route. Each stakeholder interest group requires their own set of messages and information so that they can make informed decisions about how they will commute effectively to and from and around the town of Comox. It should be noted that in addition to the feedback and inquiries we received, many attendees did communicate their appreciation for the open houses and webinar, and for taking such a proactive approach at this stage, the early stage of the project. And there was also great encouragement for continued engagement and open communication with the public throughout the life of the project. And next slide. So the work we've done to date has established a solid base for engagement with all stakeholder groups about the coming project. And it also has established an important connection with community members and illustrates what project communication can and should look like throughout the life of the project. Moving forward, the goals for public engagement will be focused on the construction details once the contracts have been awarded, including the timings, schedule, and traffic management strategy. And this will fall under inform, consult, and involve in the IAP2 spectrum. So first, continuous informing the public with ongoing project details, of which we're already doing right now with the archaeological investigation. And then pre-construction open houses starting in the spring of 2023 at a time where our contracts have been awarded and we can provide meaningful information and open dialogue with the community. And then once construction begins, to launch a public information campaign, know the route, plan your commute, for example, as a tagline to that campaign. And then consult is with the stakeholders and interest groups, because each again has their unique needs in regards to the respective audience and how messages can best reach that audience that are relevant and relatable. And then to involve the public to participate in information sharing about the traffic plan for commuters to and from Comox and the construction areas and its impacts on accessing homes, businesses, and services. And also to involve them to be responsive to the ongoing construction and the dynamics it brings to neighborhoods, and to be flexible as a project progresses. And with respect to the timeline that you see on the right-hand side, the next steps for you is to develop a communication plan and bring it to the Sewage Commission in the new year with the details about the pieces of engagement that will be used and the tools and tactics to communicate throughout the life of the project. And now this concludes my brief, Chair. I appreciate the time to address you this afternoon. And do you have any questions?
Know the route, plan your commute. It has a catchy ring to it. Thanks very much. Any questions or comments from commission members? I don't see any. It must mean that, whoops, here we go. Director Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just thought I'd take the opportunity just to say thanks. I was part of this process 8 years ago when a letter went out to a bunch of people in Courteau Beach where it didn't seem like there was really good engagement, which has actually led us to where we are today. So I just really want to thank staff for reaching out and making sure everybody's on board. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that. And Director Grant.
Yeah, this might not be a question for Mary. It could be for one of the boys here, but I'm just wondering how much we've thought about the impact on Lerwick and Ryan Road. You know, I think there could be a fairly big impact on downtown Courtenay if the traffic really backs up. So I'm just not sure if Courtenay's thinking in those terms or not, but certainly, back road doesn't seem to be a very viable route. And so I'm just wondering what the impacts would be there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I am doing a presentation just up next on the traffic management strategy. We can talk through that. I think it's the best spot, but I will address all of those items.
All right, anything further? Thanks very much, Mary. I really appreciate your presentation. And all in favor of receipt? Any opposed? That's carried. And we will move on to item number 6, the sewer conveyance traffic management strategy, December 2nd report for receipt. Moved Grant, seconded Wells, and over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Charlie Gore will present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, CAO. Thank you, Chair. Just wait for the presentation to be brought up. So I suppose I can start with a prologue on it. As Director Grant intimated, the traffic management strategy is going to be a huge part of our public engagement, of really making sure that we are able to give our communications team a chance at keeping our public well informed and happy through the project. Happy is a subjective term. Yeah. But we have put a huge amount of time and effort into a traffic management strategy. And this document is currently issued to the stakeholder group that was identified for the traffic management strategy. So it is out with the business associations. It's out with the Cycling Coalition. It's out with Comox First Nation, our advisory group, and it is currently under review right now. And we didn't publish the draft traffic management strategy to the commission today because it is in draft format, and we are waiting till we get feedback from these stakeholder groups to get it into a state that we want before we publish it to the public. So today I'd like to highlight some of the high level parts of that traffic management strategy to make sure that you're all aware of the contents. I'm sure you have access through your staff if you really want to get into the details, or you're very happy to reach out to myself and we can step through any of the components of it. But it is a high level traffic management strategy, and that's a really important piece to remember, that we don't have a contractor on board right now. We don't have detailed schedules. So the traffic management strategy is, what are we going to do for the general routes? How are we going to manage, as Director Grant noted, the concerns about Lerwick, Ryan Road and such. So I'll step through my presentation today, and just want you to keep that in mind, that we don't have the when detailed at this stage, and that will be the next part when we sign on with contractors in the spring of next year and have schedules. That will be when this strategy turns into a plan, and that traffic management plan is going to be the real detail that will go out to the public through our communications team. And this is how do we strategize the more high level, such that when we have those schedules, we know how to implement a plan with our contractor. So we've split the length of the project up into certain zones, and the real the trickiest part of the traffic management strategy is Comox Road and Comox the very western part of the town of Comox on Comox Avenue, and that's just due to it is a route, a major connector route for public, and it's also we're constrained to be building our force main within that road. So the linear nature of that zone, you can see here the zones in pink, adjacent to the Courtney Pump Station and around the slough, and from IR1 up all the way to Rodello. They've been identified as single lane areas. We don't have space to provide 2 lanes of traffic through those zones. And due to the significance of the work, we are also keeping the option open for night work within those zones, because there's going to be some times where the contractor is going to need to close the entire road and won't be able to keep even 1 lane open. Similar through the western side of IR1, it's going to be single lane traffic within that zone as well. However, night work is not envisaged. The sections in yellow, which includes the agricultural land set back from Comox Road near Farmview Road, Scott Road, along in that zone, we're expecting very minimal impacts, because that's where the pipe is offset back from the main commuter route. And similarly, around the Lazo Hill, Lazo Road area, we're expecting very minimal impacts, because we're using the trenchless technology through the hill there, and only operating on minor back roads. Within the town of Comox, you can see the orange square in the middle there, which encapsulates Beaufort Avenue and Stewart Street. That's going to be an area where the contractors work in a much more compact nature. And there's going to be rolling block closures through there, keeping access to residents who live there, but closing off those streets for people that are traveling through the area. And similarly on Balmoral Avenue, there are differing widths. There's some areas of Balmoral Avenue where there'll be ability to keep a lane open and have single lane alternating traffic. But as you move eastwards along Balmoral Avenue towards Brooklyn Creek, towards Torrance, it starts to get really tight through there. So there are going to be times there where the contractor is going to be closing that road and creating detours for the local residents in that area. I have further slides that really focus on what we're planning to do about Comox Road. But if there's any questions at this stage regarding the areas shown in purple or green or yellow, I think this would be a good time.
Thanks. And we have Director Swift.
Thanks, Charlie. And in the area where you're contemplating the possibility of night work, do you have any idea about the duration of that work?
Yes, that would be very localized times. It would be have good communication in advance. Things like paving when we're doing the large amount of surface improvements. You can imagine up at Glacier View and Rodello there, the roundabout work. The pipe installation itself isn't as complex for getting that done during the day and keeping one lane open. It's more the extents of the surface works, and they would be it would be at time very short periods, and there would be lots of time to communicate that to the public, the reason and the duration for that work. So it's not going to be an extensive amount of time that they plan to do night work in and around the residents. However, on the western portion of that purple square on Comox Hill, coming up the hill there, that is a spot where the contractor may like to use the hours between 10 p.m. and 6 in the morning where there are no residents in that kind of more rural stretch of the road to get some of the work done, because it is such a constrained corridor. Keeping one lane open while installing a large diameter force main in the other lane is very tight for getting trucks and excavators. So they're the two different kinds of work that will be happening in those zones that could contemplate night work. One would just be the surface improvements, the work that takes up a lot of the roadway, and the other is in the more confined, narrow areas of coming like down Comox Hill, where they might contemplate night work where they're further away from local residents.
Okay, so might residents anticipate a week or 2 weeks, or it's unknown at this point?
We don't have the when and for how long at this stage, but we design these projects so that the vast majority of the work can be done during the day. We're not setting up this project as a large night work project. We can't afford that kind of project. So it's our mandate as we try to fight that battle between keeping things open for the public and keeping good access for our contractor to make sure that they're encouraged to do the vast majority of the work during the day, and it will be the isolated pockets where they select to do night work.
Charlie, I'll just ask, do we know how many people will be working on the project, where the staging area will be, and if there'll be any issues around parking and just that type of impact on nearby residents or businesses?
Well, it's a big question. There's many facets in that question. We don't have exact numbers. I think we can look to previous large projects that we've done and seen that we may have, even with a large work crew, you can see the vast area through the valley that this project takes up. So you can imagine there would be a parking area set up at the Courtney pump station and the structural crew there. But the majority of the works through here is a line crew, or working with excavators and pipe installers that's actually quite a small crew. They're not going to be large crews working on our streets. So I don't imagine there'll be huge parking issues. And hopefully as these crews work through the town, this is going to be more people down there that are going to be eating out lunch every day. And so there's going to be the pros and the cons of having a project like that.
Yes, and there has been concern expressed about the impact on businesses both in downtown Comox and at Comox First Nation. And I'm assuming there's some outreach to the business community in both areas.
Absolutely. We're in detailed discussions with Comox First Nation businesses through Chief and Council, and also been presenting to the businesses of the town on the traffic management strategy, exactly this. And they currently have the document for review. So they have ample voice in the review of this document.
Thanks. Looks like you can move on.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the Comox Road is the long linear corridor that really creates the complexity for this project. And you can see here that these days with technology, we're able to analyze the flow, the weekday flow running along Comox Road. And you can see there from about 6 a.m. it starts to ramp up, and from about 8 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening, we're looking at about 1,000 to 1,400 cars in total running east and west combined along that corridor. And the reason why that volume is a big concern for us is when we look at the typical way that we do construction on projects is we use single lane alternating traffic. We've all sat there and waited for our turn to pass the construction. And that only works when you're talking about much smaller volumes of traffic. You can see here in the bottom table that as you increase the length of that construction area, the capacity of the overall system to process cars reduces significantly. And even in a very short length of construction, you can see here in the left of the table, at 100 meters of construction area, you only have a capacity of just over 400 cars an hour. And so that's just not going to be sufficient for the Comox Road corridor. And 100 meters would be a very short length that our contractors would cry foul and would have to add a lot of costs to their construction. So that's where we started looking at other options with the strategy. What can we do to keep traffic moving, but we're not able to do a more classic single lane alternating traffic. And this is where the concept of unidirectional flow along Comox Road was the inception for it. You can see here that what we are proposing in the strategy is westbound flow on the western portion of Comox Avenue and the entirety of Comox Road while we have construction along that road. And you can remember from a couple of slides previous that the real areas where this is important is from around the Couscous Kum site through to Farm View Road and along IR1 and up Comox Hill. They're the areas that we're really not able to keep 2 lanes of traffic open, and that we are contemplating this unidirectional flow. Some interesting features that were found when we analyzed this flow is one of the great things about the alternate route back to Comox from Courtenay, seen here in the blue line, is that all of the major turns are right-hand turns. So we're using major connectors that have dedicated lanes for turning right, and so that this traffic won't actually be sitting waiting at lights. It will continue to flow once it's gotten up onto Ryan Road there. So as you're redirecting this traffic eastwards, you can imagine coming up Ryan Road there and turning right onto Lerwick, then flowing down Lerwick, turning right onto Anderson or onto Pritchard. You're able to keep that traffic moving. And to Director Grant's point earlier, there is, in that analysis, we are requiring some tweaks to the way that the lights work, especially around the bottom of Ryan Road, around the Superstore area there, to keep that traffic moving, and over at 17th Street Bridge. But this solution has a lot of really really nice simplicity to it. You can imagine sitting on the 17th Street Bridge and forgetting about it. You know, we're not imagining that our public is going to be tuned in, even with our wonderful comms team, to exactly what's going on. But the signage will be there. You won't be able to turn right from 17th Street Bridge, and you'll be able to flow around the detour route. And so you'll never people won't get themselves into that problem of driving down a long way and then hitting a blockade and having to turn back. It's quite the way that this has been analyzed, and just the way that our roads are set up is quite an easy system to set up a unidirectional flow like this. If I take us back to that previous slide, you can see here that the westbound flow is slightly higher than the east, and that might just be a slight nuance. It's not significant, but some of the questions that have come up is, why don't we do one directional in the morning and the other direction in the evenings? Because that's what you would see in a large city where you see people commuting to a downtown core. And it's just not what we see in our community. You can see from this graph that it's quite consistent. After 6:37 a.m., that traffic going in both directions is flowing towards the end of the peak at 6 p.m. and then dies off. So it really supports this idea of a unidirectional flow that would be implemented during those peak hours, 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. Now, there's important parameters when thinking about unidirectional flow on a major corridor like this, and the first is emergency vehicles. So emergency vehicles have to have access through construction sites at all times. So regardless of how this unidirectional flow would be set up, it would likely be traffic light systems. That would be there's many ways that the emergency vehicles can instigate them to ensure that they can immediately close down that road and be able to access eastwards on there. So there's no concern about ensuring that our emergency vehicles have the quickest route to any emergency that exists. We do acknowledge that this is going to impact several transit routes, and we're working closely with BC Transit and our transport staff here at the CVID to quantify those and to prepare rerouting of some of those routes. There's 4 bus routes that are impacted, some of them in minor ways, for example, that we're constructing on their turnaround route in downtown Comox. And so we're putting certain constraints on our contracts that our contractors need to keep one of those turnarounds open at all times. But some of those bus routes travel along Comox Road, and we're going to need to do some detour routes for those. And so we're working through that analysis to make sure that those detours are well quantified and that the alternate schedules can be provided well in advance. With regard to cyclist transport, we're confident that we're able to keep cyclist transport going in both directions along Comox Road. And we're proposing in the strategy that an eastbound lane for bikes, similar that you see here in this indicative image, is maintained through the construction zone at all times. And depending on the width that is provided by the asphalt in different portions of Comox Road and Comox Ave, the westbound bicycle traffic will either merge in with the vehicles, or they'll be provided a separate lane. Back road is a difficult one. We all know that back road is used as an alternate route for people traveling between Courtenay and Comox, and it's something that we're concerned about, that this strategy will direct a lot of traffic to back road instead of the Lerwick Guthrie corridor that we want to send people to. So we plan on managing this by before the project is implemented, getting quantitative measures of the traffic that is already traveling along back road, the speed and the quantity of that vehicle traffic, and then continuing to monitor that as the project ramps up. And if we do see a large increase in traffic along back road, there are elevating measures that we can put in, including speed bumps, including alternating like a single lane bridge. I don't have the wording with me, to really slow down traffic in that corridor and encourage folks to travel on the detour routes of Ryan, Lerwick, Guthrie, Anderton, where we want to send them. There's also in the strategy some specific constraints that we are proposing to put on our contractors, including keeping access to the boat ramp through the entirety of the summer, so that there's no delays in access to the boat ramp over at Marina Park, as well as specific constraints around nautical days and Fulberg Festival. But other than those, we're keeping that, as I mentioned earlier, the traffic management strategy at a higher level, and just really focusing on these major items that will guide the traffic management plan when we get the contractors on board. The last slide I have here on this is just a bit of a timeline, just so that you're all aware of when this strategy will come to you. And it will be in the new year. So right now we're going through that stakeholder review. And once we get that back at the end of this week, we'll be working through our final revisions before Christmas. Then in the new year, we'll be issuing that traffic management strategy to the Sewage Commission for your contemplation and adoption. And then at the same time, we'll be taking the constraints of that traffic management strategy and putting them into our contracts with our design builder and our contractor through the town, to make sure that from the get-go, they know our expectations on the strategy here. And then, as mentioned in the spring, once we bring our contractors on board and we have their construction schedules, that will start another push with engaging with the public on traffic. So I understand that I've dumped a lot on you with this unidirectional flow, and the intent was to kind of raise the concept and give the chance for you all to have time to talk about it today, but also to engage with your staff and engage with our staff if you want to talk about it in detail, such that we can look to how we can tweak the drafting before it becomes a public document.
Thanks very much. And we do have a question from Director Swift, which I think was a couple of slides back. Thanks for your patience.
No worries. I guess I'm heartened by the idea of being able to tweak it. And my concern was around, I'd never considered the uniflow directional piece, but I'm looking at where in the yellow at the beginning of it. And partway down Comox Hill, we have Emerald Shores, which has a bunch of people living there. And also it looks like it would encompass the whole Manor Drive area. And I'm wondering if you did go to that unidirectional flow, if those people would have some ability to come out and go into Comox without having to go all the way around.
Yeah,
so
it's a good question, and one that we've looked at in detail. Thankfully, the Manor Drive folks pop out just upstream of Glacier View Drive, and they're able to, once they leave Manor Drive, they pop out onto Glacier View and come back into Comox. The Emerald Shores folks are a bit trickier, and it's one of those devils in the details kind of locations. We are looking at a way to try to make sure that they do have a little bypass to get back onto Glacier View Drive, so they're not going all the way around. But what we need to remember here is that it's not just those folks. We have a lot of residents that live along that yellow line that are going to be impacted by this, and we can't have people out there, signal folk, working at the exits of each of these residents to give them special case to get to go back against the flow. So we are looking at exactly those residents at Emerald Shores and trying to figure out how the signage would work. I think we need to remember that whilst the yellow line is very long here, this would only be implemented in the zones where our contractor is working in the portion. So when our contractors are working on Comox Hill there, between Emerald Shores and Glacier View Drive, that might be a time that they are impacted where they have to drive around. But that's not going to be for a long duration. It's not like this unidirectional flow will be implemented for a year at a time. So we are looking to make sure that the traffic management strategy talks to that in a level of detail that you can see when it comes to you, and that is addressed and it is clear what our plan is.
Okay, we have 10 minutes and several questions, so I'll ask people to be as brief as possible. Director Kerr.
Thank you. Love the fact that this is an evidence-based approach, and taking a look at the traffic science and the numbers. I guess my question would be, like Back Road, what about other potential shortcuts that people might take? We've had a couple of letters to Comox Council from residents concerned that their street will be used as a natural cut through and shortcut, and as such, their quiet residential street will now become a thoroughfare. So if we see an otherwise, a sleepy street with kids playing on it turn into a bit of a speedway, what can be done? Will that be evaluated in the early days? And also, like, what would be the implications, like a speed bumps in those areas, or signage to divert traffic? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to how traffic naturally redirects when you have large projects like this. We discourage, but we also understand and need that traffic to somehow filter out through the rest of the community. So that our focus is primarily on Back Road for now, because that is a real obvious way that residents will use to cut through. But you're right. We've heard from residents at our open houses that even the bike lane project that the town has been doing up on Comox Avenue has seen some increased traffic just up in the streets just north of there off Aiken, and so we do have all those tools at our arsenal, the stop signs and the additional signage, and we will need to be prudent about how we apply them through the project. But it is going to be a matter of really focusing and really getting good communications around this alternate route. And if we can get the tweaking of the lights right, if we get the necessary support through the Courtney Council, through the Comox Council, and working with the ministry to really get the redoing of those traffic lights right, so that we're not creating major delays on the alternate route, that'll be our best chance at really discouraging people from using those side streets. I think I'm not going to lie to you to say that people won't start finding alternate routes around, but we will be working, and I'm also not going to lie to you to say that we're going to put quantified, numbers of cars and speedos on every residential street, but we will have that arsenal. We will have the ability to implement those if there are specific streets that are really getting hammered.
Okay, thanks. Final question on this item from Director Grant.
I'll try and be brief. So do you know where the yellow line is going to start? Is that going to be around Anderton?
Rodello.
Rodell. Okay, so
Rodello
the yellow start. And then what's the one, whatever color that is, that blue or purple or?
I believe it's shown coming down Anderton right now.
Oh, so that, okay, gotcha. Perfect. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much, Charlie. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of this item? That's carried, and we have one final item on our agenda, the sewage service fees and charges bylaw update report dated December 1st for receipt. Moved Grant, seconded McCollum. Any questions for staff presentation?
Yep, just a brief by Chris LaRose to outline the purpose of this for you.
Thanks, Russell, and through the chair, just very briefly. So this report, this brief report, recommends an increase to the septic receiving fees or septic disposal fees in line with the projected increase in the municipal requisition. So our practice over the past several years is to keep those rates in step with the municipal requisition. So as the costs increase to municipal residents, so do they increase to users of the septic disposal service. So those are proportional increases for the next 3 years. And the second piece to this report is a recommendation to adjust the way that we bill for Skyrocket. So Skyrocket is the finished product from our composting, biosolids composting process. it's proven over the past few years since our upgrade to that facility, it's gotten wildly successful, and we are typically sold out of that product a couple of weeks after we finish a batch, which leaves us most of the time without any product to sell to members of the public who come looking for it. At the same time, our costs are escalating, so we thought there's an opportunity here to adjust our rates a little bit, both to remove the highest volume discount, because a lot of the product, most of the product actually gets sold to companies who mix it with their own product and resell it. So we've proposing to remove the highest volume discount to make a little bit more available to our residents, and then also similar to the septic disposal, increase the unit rates a little bit. So that combination should help to slightly more, a larger offset of our cost of managing the solids stream from our operations. So happy to answer any questions about that recommendation.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions or comments from commission members? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to receipt? That's carried, and we have a recommendation. Moved Grant, seconded Wells, and that bylaw 71 be amended to update septic tipping rates for 2023 to 2025, etc. Any comments on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried, and thank you very much to commission members and staff for all the work today. We will take a motion for adjournment. Moved Grant, second McCollum, all in